Webinar Wednesday. Today we are joined by a panel of experts from Clarity, Mount Sinai, Cisco Worldwide Technology and Amazon Web Services for a discussion on building a clinical zero trust strategy to protect cyber physical systems without compromising patient care. Webinar Wednesday, we would like to thank Clarity. As the world's most trusted healthcare cybersecurity company, Clarity empowers HDOs to comprehensively monitor and manage risk across their healthcare extended Internet of Things environment. Whether it be through a medical device or a building management system, attack surfaces grow as connected assets expand, creating security blind spots that pose risks to availability, integrity, and safety. Clarity tackles these risks to ensure cyber and operational resilience are within your reach. So for more information, please visit clarity.com. Now, just a quick reminder that you still have time to register for our Fall MD Expo, which will be held at the Renaissance Dallas Addison Hotel in Texas next week. So that's November the 10th to the 12th. So please join us for 3 days of education, networking, and the latest advances in medical technology products and services. For more information and registration details, please visit mdexposhow.com. Okay, today's webinar, as usual, is eligible for one CE credit from the ACI. You can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Let's kick off today's webinar by giving away one of our Swissforce Meister multi-tools. So using the questions feature on your dashboard, let me know the answer to the following trivia question. November is Lung Cancer Awareness Month. What colour ribbon has become the universal symbol of lung cancer awareness? I'll reveal the answer and our winner at the end of the webinar. Now, today's presentation is a pre-recorded video, so there will not be a Q&A session at the end.
Welcome, everyone. So my name is Peter Lund. I'm on the business development team here at Clarity, where I get to work with our wonderful customers and partners on things like clinical zero trust, which is today's topic. So with that, we'll kind of do a little setting of the stage here. We've got obviously clinical zero trust being top of mind with things like rising cyber threats and increasingly connected digital and clinical systems. It's really never been more critical to safeguard not just data, but the patient safety, experience, and operational continuity that go along with it all. With us is one of our fantastic customers at Mount Sinai, Dr. Tom Mustock. He's Senior Director of Cybersecurity at Mount Sinai Health Systems, and we're going to explore a bit their experience and how they got to a clinical zero trust model for their networks. So thank you, Dr. Mustock, and welcome.
Good morning. Great to be here.
So we're going to kick it off with kind of a couple of questions, and you can help us kind of set the stage on your journey. To start, I'd like to kind of dig into how did Mount Sinai begin defining and scoping their clinical zero trust initiative?
So one of the biggest challenges that we had when we first started the initiative was the lack of visibility for what was on our network. The traditional network security tools told you had a device. It told you maybe the operating system, but you didn't know if it was a medical device, an IoT device, or something else. And that was a significant blind spot. So we needed to find a tool set that would allow us to do deeper probing of these devices to identify specifically what it is and find out as much as we could, because that then enabled us to get into the zero trust configuration of our network, where you're starting to segment your devices so that they only can talk to what they need to talk to.
Makes sense. Yeah, visibility is so core to many of the kind of security platforms and programs we put in place. What was sort of the catalyst that made it a priority for Mount Sinai? Was it regulation? Was it kind of a top-down board initiative? Was it, proactive, maturity of the healthcare system?
Yeah, it was proactive maturity of the healthcare system. I mean, the threat landscape continued to grow as it continues to grow today, and the leadership realized that this wasn't going away. It's something that's going to continue to get bigger and bigger in our face over the years. So we started looking into what do we do about it before it becomes a headache.
It's fantastic. It's so great to see folks being proactive in this space, and that proactivity will certainly pay some amazing dividend gains down the road when you're able to avoid, downtime and threats and potential issues with patient care. As you guys went through kind of your scoping, what did success look like? How did you kind of define the model and where you're coming from and where you're going to? Maybe take us on that success journey.
So what we defined as success was to be able to identify what's at the end of every IP address on our network. And even in the case where something is so new that it couldn't be profiled and we didn't know what it was, we needed to know that it was there, specifically where it is on our network, and as much information as we could. And over the years, I mean, there were some devices early on that you just knew it was a Linux device sitting on this segment of the network, and you had to do a little bit of manual legwork to upgrade that knowledge base to fill in the blanks. The industry is a lot better off now. The models that are within Clarity give us a lot more detail. So we're able to see the firmware of the device, the patching levels, known vulnerabilities. So it gives us a lot of context around the device on what we need to do. And it helps us to prioritize which devices we need to go after first, second, third, because we know we can't boil the ocean.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of what were the hardest devices to really pin down from an identity, or even the hardest part of the network, or most sensitive? Maybe take us a bit through some of the kind of the challenge in getting the good identity data out to other systems.
Well, so some of the challenges early on was just getting adoption of our colleagues to participate in what we were doing. We were able to configure the tool set in a way that we were giving the owners of devices a view into their own devices. So they knew they were able to see their population. We were able to work with them and guide them, working with the manufacturers and the service providers to start patching devices, to define what we need in our network policies to keep them secure. So that just going down that path of seeing what they're doing on the network, even where the guidance was not there, we were able to see what they were doing on a normal day and start mulling through that traffic data that we were getting to see what we could block, what we couldn't block. And we did reach out to the manufacturers as we went through this journey to say, to propose to them, these are the things we're looking to block on this device because we believe this is how it's working. Do you agree with us? Because no one should know the device better than the people that make them. And they did engage with us when we approached them in that manner and showed them what we were looking to block. They were able to then tell us, either they agree or they would give us some pointers to say, you also want to add this port in or this IP address for service. And knock on wood, to this date, we have not had any issues with unexpected outcomes when we put in blocking policies. So it's
Well, that's
very,
great to hear.
very
It sounds
important.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important to keep that communication going and to involve all the stakeholders in what you're planning to do.
So that increased visibility, although there may have been some kind of resistance at first, it really did bring some of the teams together, allowed some collaboration, and even bringing in outside parties like the vendors and OEMs to have some kind of higher level cybersecurity conversations, which is great.
Correct. And some of the concerns that the teams expressed was they didn't want new tool sets or changing their workflows because they didn't see the value in it. But as we worked through it and communicated with them, they caught on real quick that we were giving them increased capabilities. So now we still have our traditional tool sets, and this lays on top of them, giving them additional detail when they need it. And we were able to engage the clinicians and everyone else, the service providers, to plan when we implemented policies to make sure that it was during periods of time that nothing would be negatively impacted should something go sideways. And we also made sure that we had clear escalation paths that if anyone did have a concern, they could raise it very quickly and we could take reactive action to undo what was done, to undo anything. But like I said, we haven't experienced anything negative yet because of that proactive communication.
That's great. Any other kind of surprise benefits that some of the team members have noted? I know some of our customers mentioned things like, operational efficiency, or physically finding devices that may have been tucked away and squirreled away by some of the personnel over the years.
Well, operational efficiency definitely was a big benefit. During the startup of our program, we were in the COVID part of our history. So we were able to help identify what devices were underutilized and where they were so that they could be redeployed to other areas, which was very helpful. We also found other teams like our incident response teams coming to us for additional data because they see something behaving a little strange on the network from some of the intrusion tools. They'd come to us with an IP address or a MAC address or both, and we could work with them to then dig in and find out what this device is. Is it truly something to be concerned with? So that really is huge, I think, to be able to really dig down, to know what you're dealing with before you react, because the hospital environment is very, very delicate, if you will. I mean, it's very resilient at the same time, but there are so many different device types doing so many different things that you really need to know what it is that you have to shut down if you have an incident. So having that visibility was huge. Yeah, another thing
being able to do it in real time with confidence. Yeah.
yeah. Another thing that came up over the years was we learned that there were a lot more device types in our environment than we could ever imagine. As we started digging in there, we were seeing vehicles connecting, literally vehicles, automobiles connecting to the network for updates. We've seen things like gaming systems, which we wouldn't expect in a hospital. When you see an Xbox 360, you think the data is not correct, but we have a children's hospital. And how do you keep children calm? You give them video games, right, to play with while they're waiting for their services. So there are all kinds of things you would never imagine to be in a hospital environment, but I always call it the Disneyland of the world, because if it can be connected, you will find it somewhere in a big hospital system.
That makes total sense. Did you guys dive into any of the kind of building management or building automation side of the business, things like HVAC,
Yeah,
generation
we
systems, anything along those
yep,
lines?
we continue to work through those. I mean, those systems, in my view, are extremely critical as well, because if you shut down a facility that you can't access different levels in the facility, or you can't move materials around, you may as well lose your medical devices as well. And if it's a power grid PLC that you're shutting down, you are going to lose those medical devices anyway. So they're very important to protect, just as important as the medical devices themselves.
Yeah, that's another big takeaway we hear from lots of customers, where they'll start to implement their visibility journey and simply realize that those systems are connected and online and getting updates from the cloud, or they're not always obvious because they're behind walls and in basements and on the roof. Well, that's awesome. I know my last kind of question was going to be around key takeaways, lessons learned, and pitfalls, and I think we started to dig into that a bit. But anything else to avoid, or any other advice you would give with other healthcare leaders in the space considering a similar journey? I always like to figure out what could have been done better upfront, right? Instead of learning as you go.
Yeah, I think communication is key, just as it is with most things in business. You want to make sure you have the right stakeholders involved. Don't ever shy away from including people. If people don't see value in what you're doing, they will back out of the process on their own. But involve your clinicians, involve your networking staff, your biomedical teams, your building services staff. Having their voices at the table will help you have a clear understanding of the data that you're working with. They'll help you as well, because as you start to share with them the data that's there, and they understand that these devices are online and how critical that is, they will want to secure them just as much as you do. So you'll find that you'll pick up a lot of allies along the way. And one thing in particular, when we're looking at cost justification, that I always tell teams to look at is, could you accomplish this without tools, and what would the resource requirements be? And that was a big benefit and a selling point for me, that we couldn't accomplish without a good tool set, the things that we did, because you would physically have to go touch each device to figure out what it is, chasing down IP addresses at the end of a wire. Now you're sitting at a desk and you see your entire inventory, everything that's connected, and you see what it's communicating to. In many cases, you can see the users. So the visibility is key. It's a huge enabler.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks doing those sort of manual walkdowns, and they certainly check the box from, do I have an inventory? Do I have visibility? Sure, you can check the box in your compliance report and say yes, but when something is unplugged or moved or a vendor's there doing service, your inventory is essentially useless a few weeks after you do it, and that's not a place anyone
Correct.
wants to have good posture in.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mustak. I think we're at time, but that was a fantastic, valuable look at some of the practical realities that you've faced and likely others faced in their clinical zero trust journeys. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Awesome. So next, I'm going to bring up some of our partners to share some perspective around the technologies that are being enabled here. How do they scale them? How are we executing against these things, and how, what success looks like from a couple different perspectives. So if I could have our folks join from backstage, and I'll do some intros as folks join in here. Awesome. It looks like we're just missing one more here. There they are. All right, folks, let's do some intros. So with us, we have Scott Von Larkin from Cisco, where he's the global sales leader for Cisco Identity Services Engine. So fantastic to be here, Scott, and a great technical alliance partner of ours. Additionally, we have Hector Rodriguez. He's a healthcare industry strategist and security leader at AWS, Amazon Web Services. And then last but not least, we have Steve Whitaker, technical solutions architect for the global solutions and architecture team at Worldwide Technologies, or WWT. I've kind of brought this team together to piggyback on, a real world customer experience, but how do we go from visibility to segmentation to deployment to implementation and infrastructure? So really lots to unpack here with the team. The first question I'm going to pose to Scott over at Cisco is going to be, from your point of view, what role does network-based visibility and segmentation play in securing critical networks?
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everybody. Hope you can hear me all right. So, from Cisco's perspective, network-based visibility and segmentation is one of the most foundational, crucial elements for a healthy clinical environment. And if you look at it, you can't secure what you can't see. So first of all, you have to have visibility, as Dr. Tom just mentioned. And that visibility allows you to do multiple things, not just see everything, but once you can figure out what it is, or whether it has a user behind it, or what applications it's supposed to access, whatever that thing is, then you can help segment it. And from a segmentation perspective, that's where, at the end of the day, the network is the single biggest asset, not single biggest, but one of the biggest assets in a healthcare environment. And that asset needs to be used to communicate with applications and devices and people. And to secure that, you need to have visibility first. Then you need to segment that so that things are accessing what they're supposed to access. And then once you're able to secure that and segment that, then you can streamline your communications. And that's, from Cisco's perspective, why network segmentation visibility is the most key thing, one of the most key things to securing and getting to a universal zero trust stance.
Thanks, Scott. And I'll maybe ask a follow-up here. So how often have you found that customers had good enough visibility with the existing technology they had to properly segment? So how often do you hear oh yeah, here's all of our devices, the MACs and IPs and identity info, and we're good to go. Let's put in was put in Cisco ICE?
Yeah, so I think, well, Dr. Tom mentioned it, like on what they discovered is what we see quite frequently, is that we think we know everything that's on our network, but when you start seeing cars and Xboxes and Ring cameras, back in the olden days, it was maybe someone put up their own access point so they can get some wireless, or maybe they put in their own hard drives so they can get some data. And now that's just exploded. And so what we commonly see is people just had no idea the amount of things that were on their network. And then the hardest part of that is certainly we could see potentially MAC addresses and IP addresses, certainly. But when you're masking, when those things are being masked, proper identification of those things is most critical, so that you can, if you can tell what pumps are in these rooms, what HVAC systems are, and what cameras exist in the network. And then those things that are harder to identify, that the operating system looks like something else. That's where it gets most difficult. And I've seen Ring cameras show up as Samsung devices, as an example. And so, yeah, the visibility is the hardest part, and getting it that accurate.
Yeah, as we kind of segment to, all the different parts of critical infrastructure that we jointly serve, I always am surprised by how hospital and healthcare systems, very different from electrical utilities or oil and gas, as things like, pumps physically move around the hospital, and as they move around and plug into different networks, they're, still the same pump, but because of the way networks operate and devices operate, they try to come with a new identity. And it's key to understand that, no, that's just that pump and it's moved from location A to B. We need to make sure it's not a new device. We need to make sure it has the same identity and likely the same ability for the right folks to access it and the wrong folks to not access it, right? So that's huge. Well, thank you for that, Scott. We're going to do some kind of wrap up questions at the end with everyone, but next I've got a question for Hector at AWS, where we're talking about obviously now the cloud and architectures and how kind of zero trust clinically is implemented there. So Hector, for you, where are you seeing healthcare organizations accelerate securely through the cloud, and what's driving that momentum?
I think when we take a look at the industry overall, what we're seeing is the healthcare industry has evolved into a modern, really connected ecosystem. So, Scott mentioned having visibility of what's in your hospital. Now it's also extended to having visibility of what's not in your hospital or in your healthcare organization. So this ecosystem includes the health plans, the payers, the insurers, the labs, the pharmas, the traditional on-prem services that we've been seeing, but now it also includes all these connected devices, these third parties that are actually responsible for about 35% of the security incidents or breaches that happen in the industry. And we live in a multi-cloud world, right? So the fact that we all represent different organizations and great partners, we also have to understand that we're representing the industry overall, and the cloud industry, the healthcare industry, the technology. So the organizations that are accelerating quickly and securely to these cloud-based solutions are ones that are leveraging technologies and solutions. And again, I reemphasize what Scott said, that gives them visibility and broad visibility across their organization, across their supply chain, into their third parties, and then also keeping up with the standards. So the one thing that I will mention as part of Zero Trust, it's, do you know everything on your network? Are you segmenting it properly? But do you understand that software bill of materials and the work that CISA and FDA and so on are now doing with bill of materials, and that Clarity does to help organizations get more detailed information about what's on their network, what's in it, what software is it running, what vulnerabilities are there, what threats could potentially be exposed and exist through those vulnerabilities, is critical. So it is about visibility, it's about monitoring, and now it's about using that data and I'm going to say in an AI driven manner to understand those patterns that can expose you to failures and to compromises, and staying ahead of it. But use technology, use data, use AI to really, again, put in a much more proactive security posture improvement, resilience improvement program. And I'll repeat the part of the question, Peter, is the organizations that are doing this holistically and getting that data and making that part of the way they work, using it to improve how their security teams and everybody in the organization improve security and apply security, are the ones that are moving very quickly into these more modern capabilities, and again reducing the risk of having an attack, or an attack that is impactful in their organization.
That makes perfect sense, Hector, and it's great to hear that your customers are kind of prioritizing secure bill of materials. Not exactly what we would have expected, out of an AWS conversation, but it's fantastic that that's coming out. And obviously, before you can understand your bill of materials, you need to understand the devices you have, and it all kind of ties back to having great visibility leads to other kind of great things. Of those kind of use cases that you highlighted, Hector, kind of what's the one that customers are kind of accelerating the most on or stressing the most when it comes to their kind of either zero trust plans or plans for cloud architecture?
I think it's a combination of a few things. Wrapping their arms around zero trust and what it really means is a big deal. And zero trust is not just a buzzword. It's very real, but it's real when you do the types of things that we're talking about. When you put in the right types of network segmentation, when you put in the right type of device management and visibility, and there's no one tool that's going to do all of this. And that's what organizations also have to understand, is that it's very difficult to say, well, I'm using this particular solution, so I have a zero trust architecture. Zero trust is a process, it's an architecture, it's a set of principles and policies and so on. And again, what we're seeing at AWS are organizations that do follow that type of approach, but also don't just implement, say, I've implemented a zero trust strategy, so we're good to go. You have to be very proactive. So you have to use processes like our assessments, the work we do with our partners, working with these teams to do something like a well-architected framework review on a timely basis. You've got to stay on top of this. And I'm going to repeat something I said. Today we live in a world where AI, Gen AI is a big deal. It's the big topic. Learn what it can do for you from a security point of view. And more security vendors have built these capabilities into their solutions, into their offerings. The work that we do at AWS with organizations like yourselves, with everyone on this call, is about bringing all that data together and now looking for those behavior patterns, those anomalies, more proactively, using agentic AI to do some of that work. So really making security practitioners more productive and helping them focus on where those vulnerabilities could really occur. So I know it's a big answer to that question. It's not just one single use case. It is time that we bring these use cases together and we create a real holistic zero trust capability across the enterprise.
Yeah, I think big takeaway there is it's zero trust is something you need to kind of iterate and design over time as kind of technologies are adopted, like AI and other new things that are changing your network and architecture and processes as well. So make sure you continue to iterate. It's not a one and done. Thanks for that, Hector. So last but not least, we're going to bring up Steve from WWT, where kind of the rubber really meets the road when it comes to implementing, integrating, and executing all this at scale. So thanks for joining us, Steve. Question for you is going to be, what's the role of trusted partners in the channel in helping healthcare organizations accelerate adoption and reduce risk?
Well, thanks, Peter, for having me here. I think the big thing that WWT brings to the table is making sure that we have a three-pronged approach. Really, we need, as Dr. Mustak mentioned earlier, it's that buy-in from the org, making sure that everybody has a common understanding, having a strategy for actually applying protection and automated workflow, and then testing that out, which we can do in our Advanced Technology Center and in our WISC lab, which I'll mention here in a little bit. But to kind of start off with the buy-in from the org, I think a lot of the problems we're seeing with organizations out there is that there's a lot of buzzwords. There's challenges that often stem from a wide array of technologies. People think, as Hector pointed out, that they've bought Zero Trust and now it's all done, and that's not the case. And different parts of the organization have different ideas of how Zero Trust should be applied. And so what we do is not only help with the different technologies, because we have a lot of experience, not only in security, but also in infrastructure, networking, and a decade plus experience in AI adoption with our doctorates there. And we have a broad partner ecosystem. So by putting that all together, we can actually get a common story that everyone in the organization can get behind. And that's going to help with when it comes down to doing architectural issues. We help our clients overcome common roadblocks with that. And by getting past the idea that this is just something that you put together and you're done, as Hector mentioned, it's actually a buy-in from everybody that this is a constant and an ever running journey. This is a guiding principle to how you actually build your organization. So when you're taking these technologies into account, we also need to have a strategic approach towards these. And the strategic approach is applying to the Protect surfaces. We can do more than just simply install. What we want to do is understand that the organization and what their business needs are. Even in the healthcare industry, you have a number of different types of healthcare. You have your clinicians, you have your hospitals, you have manufacturing, and they have different needs when it comes to a Zero Trust program. And so what we do is we help our customers build that pilot out, and rather than just going directly towards the crown jewels. That way we can get as the pilot progresses, we can see the workflows that are built into it, making sure that the pieces are in the CMDB properly, making sure the ticketing system has actually got a nice workflow to it. So by the time we do actually approach the crown jewels with whatever technology we're wanting to apply, in this case, let's say we're applying it in microsegmentation, we understand that well enough to where we have de-risked the process down. We understand that strategy, and we understand the workflow, and we've worked through a lot of those bumps that we see along the way. And the final thing that we do is actually test it. WWT has invested over $1 billion in their Advanced Technology Center, we call the ATC. This is 5 data centers, including a 6th one that's in Virginia that actually is an Equinix multi-cloud data center. And we have this there so that people can actually test what we're talking about. It's one thing to say, here's the different technologies, they work together, you shouldn't have any problems, but when we can actually test it, as you said, where the rubber meets the road, that's going to give the confidence and de-risk the actual implementation. So one of the things that we have set up that I think is it's a crown jewel in our industry is what's called the WWT Industry Solution Center, or WISC lab. This is an OT lab that actually contains OT hardware with OT connections. And what we can do is actually take products such as Clarity, and we can test integrations with other products and test them against real world OT hardware that we see in the wild. And we can say, look, it's not just going to work. This actually works. We can test it and we can prove it. And so you can go in with a confidence that when we do build out that pilot program, that we've done the testing ahead of time and everything actually works as promised. So in summary, we get the buy-in from the org and a common language that everybody understands. We get the strategy behind the protection and automation of the workflow, and we prove it in our ATC labs.
That's great, Steve. And you guys obviously do this quite regularly and become experts at it. We know the technologies work. I think there's sometimes maybe a bigger challenge around getting buy-in up front, whether it's from, executives, from the networking team, from a clinical medical team. Any tips or suggestions around how to get that buy-in up front, whether it's, a business case, whether it's, getting people in the lab to let them know that this is something, real we can do and there's real benefits. I know I've seen and heard from customers where without that upfront buy-in, the project, stalls, doesn't finish, ends up costing more than it should. Any tips there?
I think the big thing is defining the roles. What is the role of the people that are up in the C-suite? What is the role of the board? What is the role of the directors? What is the role of the CISO? All the way down to your technicians and the SOC. Making sure that everybody understands what they should be doing and everybody checks off the buy-in along the way. A lot of the customers that we have, they'll have one group of people that are all in on it, and then another group of people will say, well, we're really not quite sure if what zero trust is, or they just don't believe in zero trust. They don't understand what it is. So the big thing is to make sure that all along the way is working and everybody understands their role. And then they're not having to think about it. It's part of your organization's workflow. It's part of your process of putting everything into place.
So getting that, RACI done up front and, with kind of cross-functional buy-in, which is not
Absolutely.
easy, but I think if you get that, everything should just go much, much smoother, right? So that's
Yeah, and we
good
can
to
help
know.
out with that. That's one of our roles, right? Is to be able to talk to those different parts of the organization and then bring them all together.
Yeah, that trusted advisor role is so crucial to getting really any large scale project done, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for that, Steve. We've got kind of a group wrap up discussion kind of question that I'll pose here. So looking for a volunteer, or maybe I'll jump in here. But from a wrap up standpoint, kind of what's kind of future looking, what's one mindset shift that you believe healthcare organizations must make to advance zero trust in a way that actually works in a clinical setting? So we're kind of thinking about traditional mindsets and kind of some of the future leading organizations like Mount Sinai. What sort of shifts do people need to do in their thinking? And maybe I'll go back and pick on Hector first to talk about mind shift sets here.
I think part of it, and Steve and Scott mentioned some of this, what Dr. Mustak was saying is, and at AWS we have a number of leadership principles. We have two key things we say about security. First of all, security is our top priority and it's everyone's responsibility. One of the things that I run into in many healthcare organizations when I'm doing tabletop exercises or the security simulation type of workshops, even as Steve mentioned them, you bring them into the lab and you'll ask people, what is your role? What is your responsibility when it comes to security? There are a large number of people in that room, too many, that don't know that. They don't understand that security is part of their responsibility. So I would say really, really encourage organizations to continue to expand that culture of security across the whole organization. Everybody, regardless of what they do, they don't have to be a security practitioner, and it's not just your clinicians, your caregivers, it's everybody in the organization. So start with that. The other thing is, when you're adopting zero trust, you have to really also adopt this enterprise-wide risk management strategy. Cybersecurity is a risk management job. It is not a, hey, let's buy these tools and implement them and protect these parts of our network or our devices. But with all of that said, organizations have to think holistically. They have to adopt an enterprise-wide zero trust strategy, beginning with the NIST special publication. It's 800-270. But if you haven't looked at that, please take a look at that. But it starts with the fact that everything on your network is a resource. And network segmentation, micro-segmentation is absolutely critical. Protecting your identities, protecting your data. It is a multi-layered approach, as I stated earlier. And so we have to start thinking that way across the organization. And the other thing that I always talk about is there is a real thing called the attack process. The attack process is actually a multi-layered, multi-step process. When we have a multi-layered security approach using zero trust, we actually are undoing that attack process. We're making it very difficult for bad actors to get onto your network, to compromise your identity. You know, Scott mentioned this. Your network is so critical. It's the way they get in, and then they compromise their identity. Then they're trying to escalate privileges and move laterally. Well, think that way and work backwards from that process. Implement zero trust components that are going to put in those courses of action to undo the attack process. And the last thing I'm going to leave with on this thought, because obviously this is what I do all the time. I think about this as it is in healthcare, we have finally escalated cybersecurity to being a patient safety issue or affecting members in a health plan, participants in a clinical trial. All of us as healthcare consumers think about that. What's it going to take to really protect that data, protect that device, and protect that identity? And this is really what zero trust is all about. It is a holistic framework. Adopt a framework. Make sure you're focused on risk management, mitigating risk, eliminating risk, and using data, using metrics to help you understand where you are today and how you are improving every day. You know, Steve, you kind of alluded to this. Being in a lab, doing these tests, make sure you are measuring and managing your zero trust posture with good metrics. It's no longer just about RPO and RTO. It's about all of these other little metrics that build up to your ability to respond quickly and make sure that you minimize downtime in your organization when something does happen. And that's what zero trust really does. So I'm going to summarize it and say, adopt a minimized downtime mindset. And when you think that way, you realize these are the things I need to do to make sure my systems are up and running close to 100%, right? 100% is hard. It's kind of the holy grail, but we can get really close with these principles and these enterprise approaches.
I like that, Hector, and I really like the kind of think like an attacker mindset. It's certainly a mindset I've always been in, and even fun examples from home. You know, with two teenage children, they are always thinking like attackers on my network. So it's something we can all kind of apply. Maybe you'll go to Scott next to hear kind of Cisco's perspective from what kind of mindset shift needs to happen in organizations for clinical.
Yeah, so I think Hector really summed it up great. The reality is the mind shift that needs to happen is that this is a cultural change, and that sometimes that is very difficult to do. But until you get the buy-in that the culture needs to change from everyone, from IT staff to clinicians, that everyone understands that access should never be assumed or taken for granted, and that means that security is part of the daily operations, and it's not just a one-time project. And that means reviewing access to what, understanding how devices and data are used across departments, and being comfortable with continuous monitoring and verification. And when everyone buys into that approach, zero trust becomes real. And that's the mind shift that needs to happen, that this is a cultural change, and that it's difficult, and you do it one step at a time.
That's great, Scott. And then the benefits that come out of it, I think, are the thing that people don't always see and understand up front. It's kind of one of those things you have to live through until you have done one of these transformational projects. You don't quite get it at the beginning, right?
Yeah, and I'll give a quick shout out to WWT's ATC. That is one of the ways you could take an easier step to minimize the risk in the cultural change, and that's to test it. That ATC and that OT environment is one of the best ways that you can actually bring it to life to your senior executives when they see it. And so shout out to WWT for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Scott. That's a great shift over to Steve with maybe some closing words around how people's mindsets need to shift a bit here.
I think, Hector and Scott made a lot of great points. The cultural change, the way that we actually approach it from a technology standpoint. We need to look at security in the healthcare industry a little bit different than we see it from other industries, because when the technology fails in healthcare industry, people's lives are at risk. And unlike any other industry, this is where understanding simple things that you and I take for granted, the elevators working in the hospital so that someone can get from floor A to floor B so an operation can be done, making sure that a dialysis machine isn't going to go offline and cause problems. This is taking people's lives, and there's a risk in that happening. So the cultural shift has to be there, and we have to embody the security not only from a clinical standpoint and live risk, but just how we embed it into everything. And as a partner, we need to take a look at that and actually say, okay, I see how these different pieces of the puzzle are put in there. How do we make that part of how the organization just normally does business? I don't want the nurse to have to think constantly about, I got to do this because it's secure. I don't want my doctor who's trying to take care of a patient whose number one priority is to make sure that patient's needs are met, is thinking about security in the background constantly. We want that to be part of just everything that they do. And so it becomes natural. It becomes a workflow. It becomes easier. And so our job is to make sure that when these technologies are applied, it's not something new, it's just something part. And once we get it to that point and we test the technologies, we know they're safe, we know they work, and then we have that zero trust buy-in from everybody in the organization, that's when things come together. And that's when things do happen, and they will happen, we can quickly remediate it and get on board and make sure that everything is working back to normal as quickly as possible.
Yeah, those bonds that are kind of forged in these sort of projects only yield dividends when you actually have an incident, or even a false alarm, as those can happen from time to time. So keeping your incident response plan in mind, the right personnel, the right processes, the right communication channels are all kind of important and wrap into these programs. So that is it for kind of the
Thank you so much, gentlemen. If you'd like more information about today's presentation and sponsor, please visit clarity.com. Now, as promised, the answer to today's trivia question is pearl or white. So congratulations to our winner, Catherine White in California. Now, just a quick reminder, you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. If you have missed any of our past webinars, including any by Clarity, please visit webinarwednesday.live to view our whole webinar archive. We'll be back next week with another webinar. So again, please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and complimentary registration. Thank you once again for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.